We've already had 120 meetings since that. We have probably 4 of them happening right now as we speak, and it's just beginning. But one of the things is we're asking the community to support us. At the same time, the question that I would ask is, how is the city helping and the state helping the entrepreneurs take their next step as well? Because this is a private initiative that I've taken on,
right,
which in a normal situation would have been a government thing, but the government can't move fast enough to do the full scope, typically.
Right.
It takes too much protocol and procedure and bureaucracy to get any traction.
well, that's yes and no.
But to that end, so the question I have is, maybe there's some services and programs and such that none of our members, myself included, have any clue as to how the city, the state, and other organizations are ready to help the entrepreneur. We have a burgeoning situation here with a lot of wonderful companies with incredible technology. They just need a little help. They don't need a lot because they're starting. There are very few people that are in each of these companies, but they have each potential to grow to the point where they may have 100 jobs.
Right.
We don't know which one. Who's going to be the first one that's going to fly? So how many of you want to grow, right? I mean, it's all about growth. So I would like to see a way in which these entrepreneurs that are the future of our economy are fully supported, not just by myself and our effort, our small team, but also supported by the community, and furthermore supported by the city, the state, and the federal government. And I think there's a huge situation here where we could really leverage it with a little bit of nurturing and nutrition. We can make this a much more effective community. So with that, I'm sure you have a few things to say. Again, thanks.
No, that's great. And there are more seats up here, really. Don't be shy. There's 4 or 5 more seats up here, and it's kind of warm. I'll take off my jacket.
Please.
So that's one. That's a big tee up of a question of what we want to talk about. What are other things that, why don't I just, before I start talking, why don't I just hear from people about what they're interested in talking about as long as they're here? Topics, or rather than go into long question, but just quick sense of the room. What are topics you guys want to touch on while we're here? None?
Okay, large corporations helping with the city, is there any way they get Amazon to contribute a little bit more? Just, I mean, we're smaller companies, but that's just me as a citizen, not necessarily an entrepreneur.
Got it. Other questions, things people want to ask about? It could be anything. I mean, if like, I got a pothole in front of my house. Seriously. Okay, I take that at any question.
In other cities that have becoming burgeoning startup hubs, like Austin in particular, they've identified people that are within the government that are there to facilitate business for startups and small business. Do we have a plan in Seattle for really targeting that? I mean, considering that we're really the 2nd largest city in the country for startups, I think that we should have a significant amount of our budget targeted towards that.
Other, right here, got the buses running time, I heard pop up. Just a fair question.
Parking.
Parking?
Parking, yeah.
Yeah, parking stinks.
Honestly, transit in general is a definitive part of this. I mean, just getting people to
Transit.
to and from here is not a bad thing.
Yeah,
But that's not the most important. The other things.
Seattle is a very international city, so as a foreigner, I would like to know maybe have you on immigration.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Transit. Transit, yeah, other things? Okay, well, I'm at a slight disadvantage here because, we actually met just a few months ago with a group of people to start talking about what are the types of things that the cities can do specifically to help startups. And, there was a set of topics around that. And, the issues that came out of that discussion were, we heard lending, we heard regulatory assistance, or assistance with, support in some way. But a lot of it was, so what were the 5 things that came out of that meeting?
It was education, to train more kind of folks who have the textbooks, to
Right.
work locally, regulation was a big part of it. Trying to think of
Promotion of this as a place.
Yeah.
Visa
issues, the other one. B&O tax. Yeah, that's right, B&O tax. We talked about that one as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but one thing might come in front of all that is assistance from the city for a lot of companies getting the first customer.
Right, getting the first customer, that's a great point. So, part of the challenge is, I'm gonna start with some of the challenges the city faced. Longest, deepest economic recession since the Great Depression meant that we had deep cuts across multiple departments. And that's one particular issue we faced. We weren't actually very flush ourselves. I want to say the good news is that that's turned around a little bit. The B&O tax issue, one of the challenges is that we have a couple of different challenges. One, the state constitution has a prohibition about giving money away for private gain. Just a flat out no gifting provision. So that, so I'll give you another example. Very challenging situation is all of our businesses down in South Park who are really suffering with the closure of the South Park Bridge. A lot of immigrant entrepreneurs, and now they're heading into their third year of bridge closure right now, and they've just been hanging on. We can't write them a check. We can't write them a check. We're just prohibited by the Constitution from doing that. So what we work on is, we could come up with loans and support for facade improvements, as an example. There were ways we could try to work around it. We could do marketing support for a business district, right? Because now we're talking about a broader public purpose. To the extent we have loan dollars and funding dollars, we can provide lending assistance, but oftentimes it comes with strings attached. And it almost always comes with strings attached from the federal government. The federal government gives a certain amount of funding that we are permitted to use for lending purposes, but they are restricted usually to neighborhoods which are disadvantaged, meaning there's a certain percentage of the neighborhood is low income. There's got to be a certain percentage of the census tract. It's a little bit census tract. So when you go into the Rainier Valley, we might be able to help the business here, but one block down where the census tract line changes and the criteria changes, we can't help the next business down the block. So those are the restrictions that kind of prevent us from direct financial assistance to doing things. Having said that, we did new market tax credits for the old INS building, which enables, that's another low-cost space, which is available. New market tax credits are, again, you can only use it in certain census tracts. But what that does is basically, the federal government gives us tax credits that we can assign to a project, and somebody buys the tax credits to reduce their taxes, and those dollars then go into financing the project. But again, those have to be tied to a census tract that has certain low-income criteria. So what we're looking at is there are things we do that we can do. And I'm sorry I started with the things that we have difficulty doing. B&O tax is terrible, right? Because you get paid, you get taxed the same flat rate for whatever you do, whether you're making a profit or not. It's very regressive, and it's one of the challenges we have in the city. We have this state has the most regressive state and local tax system in the nation, and the B&O tax is a piece of that. So we could potentially take a look at our B&O tax to see what we could do, but we don't characterize by startup versus established. We categorize by type of business, and the tax rate applies whether you're a startup or whether you're a very successful business, or whether you're a big business that's very unsuccessful, which occasionally happens, as you know. So there's no sense of profit in the B&O tax. We don't have much flexibility there. We do have an Office of Economic Development with people who you can work directly with to determine what programs or levels of assistance we can provide. And frankly, we should have somebody here from the Office of Economic Development to go through what could be done. And so we have what we call our business advocacy team. And in fact, that's what, when you spoke to me at the tech startup, I immediately introduced you to one of the members of OED to talk about what we had available, specifically in programming and funds that we were legally allowed to use for the purpose of helping startups. Most of our work then actually goes into I would say, into a larger environment of how do we create the environment, in which successful, which are attractive and supportive of startups. And Seattle has that environment, which we're really fortunate to have. We have that environment because of the UW, because Microsoft started here, which was in part because the UW actually had a computer lab where Bill Gates spent hours and hours, as a teenager, and got his ideas from. So supporting education and supporting science, engineering, math, et cetera, is a piece of it. The other piece of it that we're looking at in terms of what can we do to create an environment in which creative people want to live, want to interact, want to do business, so we kind of get some type of critical mass. And the way I like to think about this is this concept of connectivity. How do you connect people to each other? How do you connect people to ideas? And then create value out of that. And the comment you made about connecting Amazon to entrepreneurs, how do we do that? And I'm going to start thinking about that, about what we could do with them specifically. They don't have the same limitations on how they use their money that we do as a public agency, subject to the Constitution. So how do we create that environment? I mentioned education as one. A desirable physical environment is another. It's no accident that people want to live now in urban, or we're fortunate, people want to live in urban, walkable areas, well connected by transit, with stores that are unique, not chains, with historic buildings, with arts, nightlife, culture. There's something about creativity that I don't think is restricted to a field. Creative people like being around creative people from various fields. And this was driven home to me when I met with the guy who was brought in to turn around K2. K2 was, you may remember the iconic red, white, and blue skis. I do from my childhood. They were built out on Vashon. And when you came in, take a look at what they're doing in Vashon, it's like engineers will live on. They can get the product designers to live on Vashon. They like it there. But I can't get the creative people and the marketing people and the professionals to all live there too. So he actually relocated K2 to Seattle. It was interesting, they were talking about Utah was competing after the Olympics to get all of the ski manufacturers to Utah, and they succeeded actually in getting a bunch of them. But he stayed here because he felt their brand was so associated with Seattle. And by the way, K2 skis, K2 is now actually like 20 brands. It's like Ride snowboards and rollerblades and snowshoes and all of these different brands in one shop. But that was the point he made, and it kind of stuck with me. Creative people of any type want to be around other creative people. So we have a real focus on nightlife, our arts and culture spending as well. I think diversity, I mentioned visa issues at one point. A diverse population also is bringing ideas into connection with each other. And we are very supportive here in the city of immigration reform. We're doing what we can to move the federal government on that. We've had a policy in which we don't inquire anybody's immigration status. We want everybody should be able to approach city government for help of any kind and not worry that their immigration status will be an obstacle. It's a basic public safety and health issue. People shouldn't hesitate to come to the government for help, but it's also something of an economic issue. The diverse population we have, different ideas, is supportive of what we're doing. Specifically on transit, I'll just say a couple of things. So we're talking about connectivity. First one I talked about was place, and a place that rewards creativity. Another piece of connectivity we just spoke about is transit. We have launched a transit master plan. We are looking at, and what the transit master plan did is we looked all around the city. It's actually a very cool study. Looked at where do people currently travel to and from every day. Where is there likely to be demand based upon future growth? And then what therefore would be the highest capacity routes that people should travel on. And we identified five priority HCT, high capacity transit routes, and then about 15 other routes within the city which are priority but not the high capacity transit priority. And the transit master plan told us something that is not surprising. Sometimes you hire an expert and they come back and they tell you something and you go, of course. And what this expert told us was, we're doing better in the region about connecting our regional centers to other regional centers. We're not very good at connecting Seattle neighborhoods to each other. Yeah, and everybody's head's not, right? You know, no, we're not. So the transit master plan really focuses on making those neighborhood connections to each other and connecting those neighborhoods to the regional transit system. The 5 high-capacity transit corridors that were identified were out Madison through Capitol Hill, from downtown to Ballard, from downtown to the U District, through downtown, as well as getting out to Lower Queen Anne. We put in our city council budget this year planning money for, we are making progress on each of those routes, so I want to just talk about that. We have planning money from the feds already. We're beginning planning for a downtown connector, which will connect the First Hill streetcar to South Lake Union, and it'll help connect folks to each other. Where exactly it'll run is what the study is about. Does it run on First? Is it a couplet on Fourth and Fifth? Or second or third, or third's for the buses, so that's unlikely right now. We got Sound Transit to take their transit planning money and move it out 3 years. So, and we put in some of our money, so we're going to do an alternatives analysis from downtown to Ballard. Do you go for the full-scale Sound Transit treatment, fully separated right-of-way all the way to Ballard? Or do we take the South Lake Union streetcar and extend it through Fremont and Ballard, mainly using the right-of-way? The latter one I described would move 26,000 people a day, which is many people as use Link Light Rail through Ballard right now. And for a lot less money because you aren't building completely separated right-of-way. We'll work with them to do the planning of the alternatives so we can make choices between them. We have money in the budget for Eastlake, and we have money for Eastlake to the U District, and then we have money to study how we could use, we'd have to use electric trolley buses out Madison because it's too steep for rail, but how could we get a true European quality, electric tram, trolley bus system, which, at grade stops, multiple doors open and close, pay in advance, bus priority, the whole way. So that's our transit planning process right now, and we've got it underway. Seattle's been way behind, and it takes a certain amount to get from here to there. Give you an idea, First Hill streetcar line took 5 years from saying we're going to do it to building it. That's just how, it's hard to go much faster than that. That's just how long it takes to go through each of the required steps, from environmental engineering, design, the alternatives analysis review comes before that to construction and approval. So we in our first 3 years in office are getting down that pathway of that 5-year process for each of the priority corridors.
I have one comment, it's kind of is related to this, but all that is great, and probably none of us in here can influence any of that decision. It's
Oh,
good to know.
that's actually false. You can all influence that
Well,
decision.
Realistically, we don't vote, but,
No, you could, I want to impress this upon you right now. If all of you picked up a phone when you got back to your desk or your email and told City Council to not delay the Eastlake funding, that might make a difference in this year's vote.
okay, well, maybe we could do that, and as a group, we're all unified on some level in here, which is one of the great things about being here. One of the things that I'm, hearing what you're saying, and looking at the work, obviously you can't rise the check, you can't go and fund all the startups in Seattle, but, what I'm hearing is what can you do, is that there's certain things that you can do subsidies. And one of the benefits for us is we hire employees for our startup. It's these little benefits that make a huge difference. My wife's company in particular, they've got 150 employees, but they offer bus passes. And that bus pass is awesome. And I actually got a bus pass from there. And it's actually surprisingly difficult and expensive to get a bus pass that works on, an Orca pass that works on ferries and buses and everything. You notice that would be a really great subsidy that would benefit all of us in here to grow.
What's the subsidy again?
Just for bus passes.
For you, we could be happy to talk with you about, is there a way to aggregate the companies here to qualify for a bus pass?
It would be
Absolutely.
really great.
Huge. Huge.
That'd be good. Cool. Well, I don't know if we can do it or not. No, I gotta be serious. We don't hand out the bus passes. Metro does,
Well,
not
yeah,
City of
I know, I'm
Seattle.
just saying
But I
it's-
mean, no, we can sit down and talk with you and see, and try to connect with you and see what Metro can do to aggregate the people here for bus pass.
Right.
We gotta hope that they'll have the program to do that, or
Yeah.
we'll make the program to do that. But we
And
can
maybe-
absolutely advocate for
With
that.
that type of a, what can the government do on a subsidy level? Maybe there's other things that would be benefits to us. And as a group, maybe we can start looking at those and reach out to you as a group and say, here's all the things that would benefit our small businesses for growth.
Absolutely, and that's in part why I'm here.
Yep, and healthcare, that, I don't know if that would be a subsidy.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, one thing we were looking at, I mean, we do look at these things, and I went to transit because I heard several people talk about it, so I just wanted to give an update on the transit, because that was a question posed to me. So I'm just trying to knock off the questions that were posed to me. So you introduced a new one, and, we're not trying to avoid any
No, I
questions
know, I
like that.
understand.
So, we looked at, for example, we've been looking at what we can do about IRAs, as an example. Is there some way that the city can use its, aggregation power or muscle power to help provide better retirement choices for small businesses? Healthcare, the world is changing with Obamacare, and I'm not sure how that one works out, but we would be happy to see what could be done in that space as well.
There's different regulations with that. There's pooling of businesses.
Mhm.
Doesn't seem very viable right now. Maybe there can be something where we could direct that, where we could pool our employees together
Uh-huh.
to potentially drive healthcare.
You want some ice water?
Yeah, that'd be great, thanks.
It's the hot seat, Mike.
No, I'm like, no seat's too hot for me, man. I don't know why hotter seats than this one, guys. It's just
Actually,
really warm in
we're
here.
really a fun group of very engaging folks that care a lot about Seattle.
Oh, no, I know that, that's why I'm
And,
here, that's why I'm here.
And one of the concerns that I have is a lot of Seattle entrepreneurs take
Yeah.
a serious look at repackaging their whole thing, getting on a train and going down to San Francisco. And there's a very compelling reason for doing that, and that's the access to capital.
Yeah, and that is a big challenge.
So how can we put together something like, I understand from, I think Sol, you were telling me about Philadelphia that had a program for actually putting together, posting a bond where companies could invest in the bond, and then that bond could be administered by the city or the state and distributed to startups to help startups lead the economy.
I am not familiar with that idea.
So I know it's the piece of the guy was talking about, is something that the Office of Economic Development helped out this past legislative session at the state level with music, or it was film credits actually. And it was a very, very small kind of pilot version of it. But I know that some of the guys in the community have been talking to OED about that already.
Right.
I don't know where that is right now.
So what I'd like to propose is a fund that could be supported by commerce throughout Seattle that would support the entrepreneurial community and create more jobs and a better, robust economy. And if that fund could be funded through the posting of bonds, then it could be administered through the state, the city, and then all the companies here could apply for something that could give them the seed capital, just to take the
Right.
first few steps to get some traction. Because one of the biggest problems is when you're trying to raise money, you have to have a business plan. Well, to get a business plan, you have to have your prototype built, you have to have some traction before anybody's gonna take you seriously. But that takes a little bit of money. $50,000 can take a company a long way, from an idea to actually hiring the first person and building out your proof of concept, what have you. Just a little bit of help goes a long way.
Yeah, and
Or what about
again,
consuming having a fast track, they do business with the city, so the city can consume services with money based out of that bond or something like that.
I'm sorry, what was the second point?
Well, I was saying just trying to create a way for entrepreneurs to be able to set up their business, do business with the city. And the city can basically use money from that bond or something to pay for the services. So basically, the entrepreneur is getting a first-time customer. And the city's not necessarily having to foot all the, basically foot all the money for that service. But I'm just trying to think, for a lot of the startups, getting the first customer is always a tough thing to do. And if there's an easy path to work with the city to implement or beta test the technology with the city, I think that'd be very advantageous.
Yeah, so we're happy to look at every idea, particularly from other cities, about how to, provide seed money or training, or, we can, doing something like providing, we can definitely, for example, provide trainings, if we have the funding for it, we can provide trainings and work with folks on how to develop a business plan. That's something we could do because that's across the board. My experience to date is a lot of these ideas from other cities about, well, let's use some tax dollars, aggregate it, loan it, runs head on into our state prohibition of the gifting of public property. That is viewed as a gift.
Well, fully understood, but if we were to take the course that the money actually came from corporations that were posting the funds, as opposed to taxation.
Right, if you could create, right, but that would probably be opposite operating to do that, and again, we're
It would require some state funds to just administer it.
No, yeah, what you'd want to do is you'd probably want to set something up that was outside of government as the way to do that, right? And we could help facilitate the creation of that. But again, and I'm not trying to throw cold water on anything here. All I'm trying to say is my experience to date is a lot of these other examples from other cities run head on into our legal prohibition in the state against this. But we should look at every other idea used from other places, and we're happy to do that and sit down.
But what if the city's purchasing a service though? You're actually purchasing.
Yeah, that's a separate question. So that would be a different one. We would have to take a look at what are the services that we need, and then how do we create the opportunity to purchase those services. When we were looking at that, for example, we participated in an apps contest, for apps that use government data. And, in part, there was the hope then that would create a service that we could use. We do buy a lot of stuff, so the question then would be, how do we connect what we're doing with what the government needs? Because I got to tell you also, there is a lot of things that we do have a very tight budget, so we actually have to, there has to be the business case for the purchase as well. So you got to be meeting a demand.
I would add that, is that, you have initiatives within the government for women and minority-owned businesses, and that is really from their population, so you have the minority population to get an opportunity to bid, to win certain bids above larger corporations, but maybe we're viewed as we're balancing a small business against big businesses, and there's some sort of benefit, like he's saying, where we would have an opportunity to get in and win a bid before a big conglomerate might be trying
Yeah, and that's something, and again, that's something we could, talk about. It would require some level of input from people here to meet with our purchasing people, to have a discussion about what is the process for winning government contracts and what is our possibility of doing that. And I say that because that's how we've increased our women and minority business enterprise practices. Yeah, but we actually had to sit down with people who actually execute it to work through what is or is not possible. If you guys wanted to put a few people together, I'd be happy to have you sit down with purchasing people in our facilities and administrative services and start working through that and see what potential there is.
Okay.
It's, sort of find out, what are, I'm thinking of this particular person, what are her constraints in that process that are placed upon her? What are the ideas you have about the types of, about how it can be accomplished, and see if there's a common ground there or not.
Yeah, I don't know if it's my particular business, even here, where I would see greatly benefit.
Sure, I love the touch screen on the wall. I mean, if I could buy one of those, that'd be great. So I'm sure there are applications. I'm sure there are applications we could use.
Place an order.
Yeah.
I would say talk to the manager so we can text our complaints.
But 80% of the feedback is positives.
Hey, we're really, I love the idea of the interactivity in what we do. And that would be the other thing to do, would be to connect with Erin DeVoto, who's the head of our Department of Information Technology, or Sabra Schneider, who's there as well. Maybe we should invite them in here. I hate to say this to you, in a lot of ways, you've got the wrong person in the room. Okay? Seriously, for this discussion, I can sit here and go, wow, great idea. I'm going to go back and ask somebody to talk to you. and then we'll discover whether it's a good idea or not. I'm trying to be straight with you about what some of our constraints are.
Understood.
So you don't walk out of here going, hey, the mayor just said he's gonna
Free
direct,
parking.
right, free parking, and he's gonna direct the city to buy all our stuff, and we're gonna be getting loans. Right? I can't. So that's, there are people who understand what we can and can't do, and are the ones who actually make the programs work. So on each of these issues, what we need to do is connect you with them, but we're very happy to explore those options, because good things come out of them.
Yeah, what interface does the city have to let entrepreneurs know what their problems are? I mean, that's part of the thing is, we're problem solvers. If you give us the parameters of the issues that you're having, we're gonna figure out a way to do it. But we don't work in government, so we don't know what the problems are. There should be a mechanism for the city departments to say, hey, here's the problem that we have, or we're paying too much money for this, and unleash the entrepreneurial services upon the government.
Yes.
I like your word.
Unleash the entrepreneurial services of the government. It would be chaos, I said. I shouldn't joke, I'm being filmed, so I'm not allowed to. That is actually a really good point, and it's one of the really biggest challenges that I think that government faces. So I'm not of government, lifetime. I went to college as an economics major, went to DC, worked for 3 years for a U.S. congressman. After, then did a little more work in Oregon for legislature. And then came up here, went to law school, and was in private practice as a lawyer for years and years. I worked in my community council, worked in the Sierra Club. So when I got into government, I've been learning about how government works too. I haven't been a politician my whole life. And it's interesting, we held a startup.gov weekend.
Yeah.
And that was the first startup weekend that was a .gov version, and I think there have been something to the tune of, how many, 5,000 startup weekends by that point or something like that?
A lot of, yeah.
2,500, I don't know what it was, but it was like lots and lots and lots of startup weekends, and this was the first one that was a .gov version. And there's a lot of institutional biases in government against change that we've been working to overcome. And you get, and I'll describe a couple of them, you get process after process that's built up. So if you understand that oftentimes the highest priority of government, you'll hear this, is public safety. And I'll expand that to be public safety and health. And that means more than police and fire. Right? It means your building inspectors, it means the safety of your roadways. In fact, almost everything we do ends up coming back to public safety and health at some point, which is amazing. Human Services Division, education, Office of Education. So what you tend to get is, just so you understand the dynamic, is you tend to get a directive that there's a problem that must be prevented, which requires a rule against it, and a regulator whose job it is to not make sure that that rule is appropriately followed. And then after a few decades or more decades of this, you have a situation where somebody to get a restaurant permit needs, like, we are mapping. We are right now, we've got a project underway right now to map the restaurant permits that somebody has, the permitting process that somebody has to go through to get a restaurant permit. And I'm not sure, actually, at the end of the day, we're going to find that it's mappable, right? It's because there are contingencies on contingencies there, and sometimes they circle on each other, but somehow or another somebody gets through to the finish line after a long enough time. So that, I think, is one of our biggest challenges, is trying to switch government from a focus on the job of government is to take this rule and enforce it, and only this person in this department can enforce this rule, and only that person can do that one, to one in which we're customer-facing, customer-centric. What is it the customer needs, and how do we deliver that to them? We try to fudge the difference by having our Office of Economic Development and its business advocacy team be that person. Having said that, we have tossed up a lot of good new innovations. If you go to our website, you'll see we're doing a much better job of pushing information out that we have. And next, like our where's your snowplow, all of our,